Welcome to Unsilent with your hosts Dave and Brian. This is not another current events podcast. We're digging deeper, diagnosing, and discussing what's really going on today, how we got here, and providing observations for future generations.
Welcome to Unsilent. We're Brian and Dave, and we'd love to hear where you think we got it right and where you think we completely botched it, which you can do by leaving us a comment on our website, unsilentpodcast.com, or on Rumble, or on Facebook, or any one of the other social media channels. So, Brian, what's on your mind this week?
Well, as we're releasing this, the election is only 4 days away, but you and I are talking a few days before that, so we're not going to get much in the election probably. But I did see something that I wish I could show you the video, but I'm having some technical difficulties on my end, so I'm going to play you the audio instead. This is a guy named Kevin O'Leary, aka Mr. Wonderful, who's on the TV show Shark Tank and has been for, I don't know, 10 years or whatever it is. But he's having a lively discussion with a gal on CNN, and I'm going to play this for you. It's about a minute long. I'm going to play this for you. And again, I'm going to have to hold my speaker up to my microphone because my technical difficulties here. But that I'll play it for you, and then we'll chat about when I'm done here. So
All right.
Here we go.
Idea of going to war with China with tariffs to change behavior.
But it didn't change behavior. All it did was hurt American companies.
Weak leadership that doesn't know how to implement.
This is the same leadership. It was Trump who
it started with Biden, then it was Clinton saying, let's democratize China, let's show them democracy, and they'll play fair and they'll play fair.
But to Catherine's point,
it's time to raise tariffs to China to 400%.
Trump already raised tariffs on China.
Not enough.
There have been many studies showing that U.S. companies and consumers are the ones who bore the cost.
Academic study. I'm doing real business in China. I'm actually doing business there.
Yeah.
I'm actually working there. There's no academics in my
Where
company.
do you think they buy their inputs from?
Let me explain something to you.
From China.
The Chinese steal my IP. They make the same product with the molds that I pay for there. They ship them into this country under a different brand. I don't like it anymore, and I've been trying to solve this for 30 years.
If you tariff everything from China,
there's no academic in my world. I'm
you're going to
doing
be
business in America.
What are two clips that give off the
Here's a businessman who's a multi-billionaire who actually owns a company or companies plural, I don't know which, probably plural, who actually does business with actual companies in China, sitting next to somebody, I don't know, half or 2/3 of his age, telling him what reality is from her academic studies and her expertise of all the things she's learned in academia and statistics and the narrative on the news. And here's a guy who actually is doing the business in this environment, and he's on the defensive.
Right. Yeah, this is just infuriating. It's like, but academic studies. So, well, how many of these people that did these academic studies have P&L responsibility on a day-to-day basis? I mean, how many of them could read a P&L and look at it and say, okay, this is what this company needs to do, or cash flow statement? How many of them really understand? I mean, Brian, it's one thing. I learned business in college, right? A certain kind of business, at least. So I learned something about business and economics in college. Okay, go ahead and say what you're going to say. I know what you're going to say.
I was just going to say, this gal that was just talking probably doesn't have the benefit of having gone to Evergreen State College like you did.
I knew that was coming.
We can't give her the same kind of credence we give you because she did not have that level of teaching.
Clearly. We can check that off because I saw that in your eyes. I knew you wanted to say that. So we can check that one off the list. So I will continue.
Okay.
The funny thing is about these folks, though, that they think they know the real world through simulations. I mean, it's sort of like, and there's plenty of good stuff that comes out of colleges, but you have to take what is the study data and you have to apply it in real world scenarios where it can be stress tested, where it can be applied in ways that have impacts from things that they didn't study. The problem with a lot of this the theory behind this is they say, well, we study this and this and this and this, where there's this hypothesis, and here's the factors. Well, in the real world, what ends up happening is, yes, that's all true. Those are all interesting factors, but you didn't account for X, Y, and Z, only for A, B, and C. And so actually doing business in China is a whole different thing than just studying what these limited number of inputs that you think make sense in your hypothesis. I mean, that's the real thing.
Theoretical reality based on our studies and our models and our hypotheses and things like that is not tested in a think tank and is not put to the test of reality in those environments. And those are great things to incorporate and try.
Right.
But you still, like as you said, somebody with P&L, profit and loss responsibility, will implement ththose things, keep the good ideas, and throw out the bad ideas based on actual real world results. And I think that one of the things that this aligns, it parallels exactly with what we went through in COVID. There was the science, and then there was real science. And the science said you should dismiss the methodology, the practice, the process of science, of having an idea, testing it, verifying what's right, figuring out what's pretty close, completely throwing out what's wrong. That was universally dismissed across the board in all media. And the people who were doing real science, like doing the process of science, turned out to be correct. Big shock. The people who were espousing the science turned out to be completely wrong. Again, big surprise. It's exactly the same modality where the narrative has to win, even if real world instances or actions or results prove otherwise. The narrative has to prevail.
Well, in a lot of this is, relating it back to business. You've written a bunch of business plans. I'm sure I've written lots of business plans, and they're based on good data and information and experience. But what you do is you take a business plan, you create the best one you can, and then you apply it at a point in time, and you start with it at a point in time. The reality is that things change along the way all the time. So you can have the greatest plans, but then things change and you modify them. And there's a saying in business, you've got a great plan, try it, and then fail quickly. Do it, but don't hang on to it just because you think you wrote a great business plan. Find the stuff that doesn't work and fail fast. That is a key component in being successful. But when you have a narrative driven process, then failure is an admission that the narrative was wrong, and therefore you can't admit to it, and therefore you don't adapt and change as the world changes. Nothing is ever static. Things are always changing. People getting older, markets change, people change, everything's changing. And that's the problem. That's one of the main problems with that narrative driven model. That was one of the big problems in COVID is, okay, well, here's the principles, and we can't admit that we were wrong in the first 6 months or the first 3 months of the first year, whatever, because then it'll undermine our authority, and it's all about authority.
Yeah, the thing that really strikes me about, so all the things that you and I just said, I agree with that 100%. The thing that really struck me about that, though, is if you back up even 6, 8 years, certainly 10 or 15 years, and prior to that in my lifetime, CNN would have brought a billionaire like that doing business in China as the expert, and would defer to his expertise.
Yeah.
In the context of this conversation, I wish you could have seen the video. He's like the goat tied up in Jurassic Park, where he's tied to the stake there, and he's presumed to be the rube. He's pretend to be the person who needs to be educated, and the quote unquote expert and the TV show host are presumed to be the ones with knowledge who need to re-educate this guy and get him on board. The fundamental way the conversation works is 180 degrees from where it was 10 years ago, where he's now the guy who needs to be taught, versus the host having this very successful multi-billionaire on to tell them, here's what stats tell us, how's that apply in the real world? He would have been allowed time to explain what the real world is like, incorporating some of those stats. And here's what they're on point with, and here's the things that they don't really take into consideration. Therefore, here's the reality of the big picture.
Yeah.
That's not the posture of this conversation at all.
No, and I and I think what turns people off about it is one, the recognition that this is a guy who's doing it, and you're telling and he's doing it successfully. You're telling him he's wrong, with no actual experience yourself in doing it. So I think that's one thing that turns them off. I think the other thing that turns people off, certainly turns me off, is the arrogance.
Yeah.
Just the unmitigated gall of somebody to say, look, Kevin O'Leary, you highly successful person who's actually implementing these principles, you're wrong. And you should listen to me because I'm a $150,000 a year TV host who's never done anything other than this. The arrogance, we talked before about why people are turning to, unusual sources and more kind of Joe Six-pack kinds of discussions. And I think a lot of it is just because of that arrogance. We don't want to be preached to, and we especially don't want to be preached to by people who don't know, who only have a theory and who only have a limited amount of study data that they've done to try and reinforce their narrative. And a lot of it is, of course, when she went out and she found that study data, I doubt that she was aware of any of that before. She went out and found study data as to prove her point.
Yeah.
Not to learn something, not to, open a business herself and compete with Kevin O'Leary. Heaven forbid.
Right.
She'd be crushed on day one. But she went out to find data to argue with him because he didn't support the narrative and said that, Trump is a bad guy. I mean, the ultimate undertone of all this is Trump's a bad guy, right?
Right.
Because it's all about we couldn't really be talking too much about the fact that a lot of the tariffs Biden left on. We couldn't talk about the fact that in reality, I'm, as a general rule, as a general economic rule, I'm not super in favor of tariffs. But one of the things I've learned is that, except for solving trade imbalances, except one of the things I've learned is that in the steel situation, the actual Chinese government had to pay a lot of those tariffs themselves. A lot of it didn't get passed on to the American people because they artificially subsidized their own steel industry. So it didn't turn out at all like she was saying.
Well, interestingly enough, I used to be in the steel business. My first real job was in the steel business. I was a card carrying teamster, and I ran cranes and heavy equipment that turned big 25, 30,000 pound pieces of steel into little tiny, 50 to 200 pound pieces of steel. And in the late 90s, I worked for a company so we were a distributor, not a mill. We didn't make steel. We bought steel from the mill and then cut it to size that the manufacturers and things like that would use, and we sold it to them. And in the late 90s, when these tariff wars were happening between China and Korea and Brazil and Russia and the US and I don't remember all the other players, but those were Venezuela was involved in, I think, a little bit too. These were the big players that, it put, well, I mean, I laid off 14 people in one day. I was a second shift supervisor, and I let 14 people go in one day. We saw a dramatic, and we only had 38 people in the shift to begin with, So we, as American citizens, saw the downside of it. And like you're saying, the Chinese government was propping up their stuff. So anyhow, the thing that this reminds me of is, the term Orwellian is being tossed around the last 5-10 years way more than I ever remember hearing it. I used to hear about it when people were like exaggerate, like Big Brother's, it's Orwellian, but back 10 years ago, like our idea of what was Orwellian and now is like, dramatically different.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of like, don't, the ultimate, what was it? The ultimate final act of allegiance or whatever, however he phrased it, was dismissing what your own eyes saw to go along with the party line.
Right.
And that's what's happening here. And here's this multi-billionaire, super successful guy saying, I won't even hire people like you in my companies. And this is why. You're proving my point as to, he said 2 or 3 times in that clip I played you, I won't even hire. There's no experts in my academics or whatever he called them.
Yes,
there's no academics in my companies because of what we're seeing right now, where you take this information you've been taught in a theoretical sense and try to tell me, the person with profit and loss responsibility of over, tens or hundreds of thousands of jobs,
Right.
what reality is. That is why I won't hire people like you. And they're so like you said, like the gall and the arrogance, but
Yeah.
also the self-righteousness and
Yeah.
who cares what reality is? This is the way it must be
Right.
because my entire ego and identity is tied up into it.
Well, and it's really, at the end of the day, it's a non-academic way of perceiving the world because it excludes information that wasn't originally input. So and it is defining the world according to a narrative as opposed to a blank slate kind of observation about how things really are. And this is where you get this is where everything goes wrong. I mean, to and this is where, for instance, let's go back a long time in history. It used to be that the academics thought that the sun moved around the earth because of observation, because we see
Right.
the sun moving around the earth. Well, now we've got and that was the narrative. And that was the approved narrative. And when somebody came along named Galileo says, or Copernicus says, this is not quite right. And here's the new observations. Well, we can't have that. You got to be killed. So
he's a heretic.
He's a heretic. We got, he's questioning the way that our universe works. So, and whenever you question that narrative, you become a danger and to the power structures. And that's where, I think a lot of people are just pushing back because it's just too obvious now. The emperor has no clothes. It's just too obvious.
Yeah. Well, we're citing here many historical things over centuries now. You got Copernicus as a heretic for saying the sun does not go around the moon,
right,
or the earth.
Earth.
You mentioned the emperor's new clothes. What's that, from 1750, 1740, somewhere in there? And and then now we have the Orwell, and again, going back to you and I having this theory that these things just happen in cycles. They happen. We're citing these kind of cliche-ish kind of sayings as as indicators that of the moment we're in, and here same thing happens over and over again. So I think something you said that was interesting is we're more and more people are pushing back against that. And I have a chart here I'm going to describe to you because it's not a video. It's just a graph that shows trust in the media. It's not only are people pushing back, but they're taking in less. They trust the media less, right? So in this chart here, it goes back to 1972 and it goes to 2024, and it shows Republicans, Independents, and Democrats trust in mass media. And so in 1972, and the numbers on the left side are not details, so it looks like it's about 74% of Democrats trust mass media, and about 68-ish% of Republicans trust mass media, and about 60% of independents. And then for Republicans, it goes up a little bit, around 76, I'm guessing after the Nixon thing.
Yep.
And for independents, it goes up to like the mid 70s, 70% trusting the mass media in 1976. And all three steadily decline to about 1996, where now Democrats are down from about, I'm guessing, about 74% to about 68%. Republicans down from about 68%, I'm guessing, to about 40%. And then there's another spike around 2000, 2004, that era, which I'm guessing is 9/11 and all the things that, the quote unquote war on terror, all that kind of stuff. More steady declines. And then a major shift. They kind of go down in parallel, though. The Democrats trust the media more than the Republicans consistently.
Right.
But they both are going down the chart in kind of alignment with each other. But then around 2014, 2016, there's a major divergence. It goes from Democrats being around 50% trusting the media up to like 77%, I'm guessing, 76% somewhere. So major spike for them.
Right.
For Republicans, it goes from about 30% down to about 13%, it looks like.
Wow.
And then over the course of the next 8 years, the Democrats end up at around 54%, and Republicans are steadily down since 2015, 2016 at around 12%. So part of the divide in our country is how much do you trust the narrative?
Right.
How much are you taking that information as being legitimate and taking it to heart? How much are you pushing back against that? How much are you in the science camp versus
Right.
doing the actual process of science camp, even if it gives you results you don't like?
And I think a lot of that comes back to if you trust the institutions that are aligned with the media, then you're going to trust the media more. So in other words, during the 8 years of Obama being in power, he was aligned very closely with the media. And so therefore the narrative, the political power structure and the media power structure were all in alignment. So therefore, if you trust one, you trust them all. But it's also interesting to see that how that changes when, and after the advent of widespread internet stovepiping. In other words, Twitter, Facebook, all the different scenarios where you can get your media sources from somebody else, and a lot of people would still be trusting the media if they trust the power structure along that. But the other people that are exiting, a lot of Republicans in particular, are finding themselves different media sources. Now, of course, what happens when you do that is when you have tribalistic media, then everybody becomes essentially you've got your own set of facts, and everything does become more hardened, I think, as a result of that. And that's part of what we see happening right now.
Oh, Dave, as we're recording this, this is the last time you and I are going to talk until the election.
Right.
There was all the what I would perceive to be shenanigans in 2020 with
Right.
ballot, count watchers to be, they were sent home, and then a couple 100,000 ballots are counted, and it reminds me of the stuff we saw in 2000 with the hanging chads, and like we're in the season where if what they're saying has, the governors and things like that preparing people for, hey, it might take a couple weeks or a couple days or a few weeks to get ballots counted. I'm anticipating some sort of major newsworthy things happening in certain counties or districts or even states.
Yeah.
It's my belief that we're kind of teetering on a moment that could get pretty volatile.
Yes.
Now, again, I don't mean like I'm hoping for that, obviously, and I don't mean like there's going to be bloodshed in the streets. I don't mean anything like that. But along the lines of what you and I are talking about, of the people who trust the narrative versus people who are very distrustful of the narrative, I think we're kind of coming into what could be an inflection point as these counting whatever things start happening. What's your perspective? How would you explain to Kenny G what this is like a few days before the actual election?
Well, I do think that's true. I think it's a very dangerous time, and you wouldn't necessarily say that it's uh, one side or the other. So the first thing I would say is that however it turns out, or if it turns out the worst case scenario is the one you just described, where it takes weeks or a month or something to so we know, because during that entire time everybody will be seething. Everybody will be coming up with snippets of what they saw that says they cheated or they cheated or they cheated or they cheated. And however that resolves, whether Trump wins or whether Harris wins, the other side will say that they cheated. I mean, so that's going to happen either way. I mean, so if in this is not, people think, well, yeah, 2020, and look, you mentioned hanging chads. Go back to the 20 or the 2000 election, and for a long time after that, the Democrats said Bush was installed, not elected. He was installed by the Supreme Court. Basically, he's not a legitimate president. So you can't say, well, Trump started this. No, this started a long time before then.
Hillary Clinton, as far as I know, she has not ever retracted her statements that she made multiple times that Trump was an illegitimate president.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't think it's a stretch to predict that whoever wins, the other side is going to essentially level those same charges. The difference now versus 2016 or 2020 or even 2000 is the level of distrust, the level of anger, the level of the other guy is evil, whoever the other guy is evil. That's what raises the temperature that much more. And I mean, after each of the elections in this century, the trust in the electoral process was waning significantly by whichever side lost, and in whichever election. So it's the people like to ask people that are surrogates or that are affiliated with President Trump, well, will he accept the results of the election? Well, that's a fine thing to ask on statewide, on national elections, wherever you want to ask it, because it's not as if it's just a Trump thing. It's all over the place. The difference this time is that, and the real danger is that, if you and I suspect that somebody cheated, we're not going to pick up our guns or our knives, or we're not going to take to the street and, do a summer of 2020 riot and, break things and kill stuff. But there are a significant number of people in both camps that, if they think that there is no, that's the end of the republic. The other side cheated, and it's the end of the republic. Democracy did die in November of 2024. If enough people, and it doesn't have to be tens of millions of people, if enough people decide that democracy is dead, then we do have a democracy threatening event on our hands.
Right. And you throw in the censorship where, like, we don't really allow debate anymore, or we don't have willing participation in debate anymore because politicians don't answer questions on a level never seen before, and we censor people who have dissenting opinions. You toss that in there mildly, but also the availability of technology for people to do videos at any point, and the preparedness they will now have. Like, there were some videos here and there in 2020 of people filming the election workers putting up the poster board on the windows so people couldn't see in. There were smatterings of that. But now people are prepared for they're expecting those kinds of shenanigans. They're going to have their phones charged and at the ready on a moment's notice. And as you and I have been talking about this episode and the last one, you have the camp who says the narrative must be true no matter what. And then you have the camp that says, nah, I don't think so. And here's what I'm basing that on. It's going to be, actual evidence.
Right.
And they're going to have actual evidence if those kinds of things happen. And so the polarization, the extreme disconnect between people are saying, here's a video, you must trust this video of Sally Smith at the voting booth, and people saying the narrative must win no matter what. Who cares about that video? Is going to be unprecedented.
Yeah, and that's where it becomes a danger, a literal physical danger. Now, I hope that nothing, I hope there's no violence, hope there's no riots, hope there's none of that kind of stuff. Because, at the end of the day, nobody ultimately wins, if society ends up coming apart. But it also at the same time wouldn't surprise me if that happened, because people will just think it's over at that point. And you're right. At that point, if you got one person saying, no, we have to trust that the institutions are strong, and the other side saying there's zero trust, there's really no, I mean, how do you negotiate that, right? How do you say, okay, well, I'll compromise on this, you compromise on that? The basis of any good negotiation is nobody ends up really happy, but you end up being able to live together.
Right.
The question is, if that goes that direction, then how do you end up negotiating your way through that with people who believe there's no democracy left anymore? That's why it's been, I've talked to, I don't know if I mentioned this before, so if I did, I apologize. I talked to somebody recently who said, yeah, if Trump wins, the only way he could win is if he's cheated, and if he's, potentially committing violence. That's the only way he could win. So if you've got both sides saying that, I don't know, we're in a dangerous spot.
Yeah, I don't listen to a ton of stuff, and I don't watch a ton of TV, but the stuff I do listen to, and I listen to more conservative stuff
Yeah.
because I enjoy listening to that kind of stuff, and the amount of like preparatory conversation about one of the things I hear pretty regularly is the Democrats are going to cheat. We have to overwhelm the voting such that the cheating is not the difference maker.
Yeah.
Like, and again, the same is true on the other side. Well, Trump, of
Yeah.
course, is going to cheat. Like, like everyone is already gearing up for cheating being baked in,
Right.
and so everyone has a reason to um, justify whatever happens because they've already spent at least 6 months, maybe only but more so for sure in the last few months,
Right.
like setting the table for cheating is going to be, if we lose, it's because of cheating,
Yeah.
obviously. So if we lose, it's because this wasn't fair. Like that, they've set the table for this on both sides. Where I'm with you. I don't know how you navigate that when that's part of the equation. Like if we win, then we deserve to win. If we lose, it's because they cheated. I don't know how we get through that unscathed.
Well, and I wonder if it's now. Let's envision the best case scenario. The best case scenario is that there's no wait, that we find out, and it is possible. It's interesting that this time around that both Republicans and Democrats are voting early via mail-in ballots, etc.,
Yeah.
more so than they did in the past. I mean, one of the things that I think COVID has done is it's prepared us to do things more remotely. And even Trump, when he was asked, he was a great critic of that, and I can understand why. I mean, I've been Washington's been a mail-in only state for a long time, and I firmly believe that that's one of the reasons that Dino Rossi, who actually won the governorship, was denied the governorship because it was easier, frankly, to cheat. Now, maybe somebody will say I'm a Washingtonian conspiracy theory, but I believe all the evidence is there to show that.
Yeah.
But if, for instance, because of all of that early voting, et cetera, if it's possible that we do know on election night or, the next day, and we don't have to wait, and there isn't a lot of time for people to simmer. Now, so how much do you think that ratchets down the allegations of cheating if we have a clear winner on election night or the next day?
I think that there's a significant part. I can't speak for how the Democrats and progressives see this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I do believe for the conservative folks, the folks who are really wanting Trump to win, there were law changes in 2020 that are still in effect.
Yes.
That changed the election process.
Right.
Kamala Harris was like it or not, think it's fair or not fair, she was installed as the candidate.
Right.
There was a guy who ran as a Democrat against Joe Biden who got several 100,000 votes, and he was not even considered when Joe Biden stepped aside. They put her in place, and they
Right.
didn't figure into the calculus, the electoral process. Like that was
Right.
all dismissed.
Yep.
And there's in the town I live in, it's one of, I think it was like 17 different areas on election day in 2020 where they ran out of ink in the printers, or the size of paper they were using was a half an inch too small, so the ballots didn't print the right way. And
Yeah.
people know, like, real life experience in the town I live in for sure, and you hear this across the country,
Sure.
of 3-hour lines and waiting to vote, and people just gave up and went home.
Yeah.
And because they have to work, they have to take care of the kids, they have to pick up their kid from soccer practice or whatever. And these are all known things. There's ample video out there of people dumping in backpacks full of ballots. Like these are
Yeah.
known things. And so I think that for the conservatives anyway, they are not only anticipating that stuff, they know it in their gut to be true with these kinds of shenanigans. And again, I'm
Yeah.
not, how much legitimacy there is to one thing or the other, I don't know.
Yeah.
It can't be 0, and it's probably not 100.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's a certainty that this is going to happen, and there's anyone who I think would be objectively looking at the current situation with the media
Yeah.
and these power sources, they don't want Trump there.
Yeah.
The people in the Pentagon, the people in the bureaucracies, the media, academia, Hollywood, like all these big influence centers do not want Trump in there.
Right.
And these shenanigans happened.
Yeah.
And so I think that people are just, they just know what's going to happen. And if it does go down where there's a hanging Chad type situation,
Yeah.
or undoubtedly, like there's already stories of people who have voted early in some states and they say they voted for Trump and they watch the screen flip it to Kamala
Yeah.
Harris. Like
Yeah.
there's a state where you go into some kind of thing where you punch in how you want to vote and then it prints it out.
Yeah.
Like they say, I voted for Trump and it printed it out Harris. And then I walk over to the person and there's already stuff like that happening. And again, I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah.
But if Trump loses, people are going to lose their minds because they know the power structures don't want him there.
Yeah.
If Kamala Harris loses, they've already set the table that the only way Trump can win is if he cheats. And
Yeah.
frankly, I don't think it matters who wins. I think the other side is going to come unglued.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the only possibility, yeah, I mean, I think the only, yeah, I mean, yes, you're right. I'm trying to think of some scenario where we, dodge a bullet, if you will. And the only scenario I can think of potentially is if there's, if Trump, um, sweeps the swing states. If he swept the swing states, he comes up with 320 electoral votes, then I could potentially see that it's just too much to say. But again, yeah, I won't make a
If
prediction.
there was a 1984 style sweep
Oh, yeah.
where, I mean, like there's stories
Every
out
state
there
but
that
one.
in the early voting, Trump is like leading in Nevada, which was, a year ago, you'd think there's no way that's possible.
Right.
There's stories that he's leading in New Mexico. A year ago, there's no way that was possible. It's going to be interesting to watch, because if Trump did run the table and had a serious victory, which
Yeah.
I don't think is out of the realm of possibility, because
Yeah.
as you and I have been talking over the last few weeks, some people are just not that interested in Harris, so they might just stay home. They might just vote by not showing up to vote, right? It's gonna be an interesting situation, because the people who believe that you have to trust the narrative, that the election is going to turn out how it turns out, and you're not supposed to go against what the institutions like the election commissions or like the election, whoever power structures that count the votes, you're not supposed to go against those. So if he wins decidedly, they're going to be in kind of a pickle. On the other hand, if Trump doesn't win, like he loses, like he did, what was it, 17,000 votes he lost by, or 37,000 votes he lost by in 2020, I think that's worst case scenario. I think if he loses by a slim margin like that, it will substantiate the belief, whether it's right or not, I don't know, that they cheated just enough to get him in. And I think if he wins decisively, it will put the election part to rest. But now they have to go get Hitler, and I think he just shifts the reason, but the desired outcome will be the same for sure.
That's a cheery outlook. Yeah. I mean, I think you're exactly right. I can't find any fault in that logic. I just try to think of, is there any possibility that this doesn't, I mean, what's the next 3 months going to look like? I hesitate to even venture a guess, but
I think that the next 3 months will be a cakewalk if Trump wins, and there's no certainty that it will. I'm not predicting that he does, but if he does, I think the next 3 months will be substantially more fun than the 3 months that follow his inauguration.
I think that's probably true. Yeah, I think that's true. Hopefully, just stay out of the urban centers. If that happens, you'll be far much better off. Stay out.
You don't got to worry about me. I stay out of urban centers as much as I can anyway. So
yeah, I do. Well,
the next time I see you, Dave, we will be talking about whatever headlines are going on post-election, at least within a day or so post-election. So it'll be interesting. No matter what, it won't be boring. I can tell you that.
It won't be boring. That's true. That's true.
All right. So for those of you listening in the current era, as Dave mentioned, we'd love to hear where you think we got it right, where you think we're off point. You can do that by going to unsilentpodcast.com or leave us a note on the Rumble channel. There's a great comment section there. Great place to voice your opinion. We want to make sure we're explaining to Kenny G, somebody who lives 60 years from now, what this moment in time is like from our perspective, and we try to be as broad as we can and get many different perspectives. So Share your opinion there. And what do I got here? What else do I got here? Hold on, Dave. I got to check my notes, see what else I got here. I don't think I have anything else. So now, until next time, this is Dave and Brian signing off.
See you next time.
Do you want to be Unsilent? Make your voice heard on our social media channels and share where you think we got it right or wrong. Go to unsilentpodcast.com for social links so you can join the discussion.